Swatan was the first.
Well, welcome back. You're watching the latest here on DD India. We're joining, we're taking you across live to an External Affairs Ministry's special briefing that is taking place on Prime Minister Modi's visit to the G7 summit in Italy.
Thank you very much, and thank you, friends from the media. Very good afternoon, and thank you for coming here this afternoon for this special briefing on Honorable Prime Minister's upcoming visit to Italy for the G7 summit in Apulia, Italy. At the invitation of Honorable Prime Minister of Italy, Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji will be travelling to Apulia, Italy tomorrow to participate in the 50th G7 summit, which is to be held there on 14th of June, that's day after tomorrow, where India has been invited as an outreach country. The visit assumes a significance as this will be Honorable Prime Minister's first overseas travel after resuming office in his third consecutive term. It will also afford him an opportunity to engage with other world leaders present at the G7 summit on issues of importance to India as also to the global south. This will be India's 11th participation in G7 summit and Prime Minister Modi's 5th consecutive participation at the G7 summit. On 14th of June, that is the main day for the G7 outreach summit, Prime Minister will participate in the outreach session along with the other countries invited for the outreach summit. At this session, the focus would be on artificial intelligence, energy, Africa and the Mediterranean. It will be a block agenda item where the G7 and the outreach countries would share their views and perspective. India's regular participation at the G7 summit clearly points to increasing recognition and contribution of the efforts that India has been consistently making in trying to resolve global challenges, including those of peace, security, development and environment preservation. India's participation at this G7 summit acquires particular salience in context of India's recently held, well, not so recent, presidency of the G20, where India took a leading role in building global consensus on a number of contentious issues. As you are also aware, India has so far organized 2 sessions of the Voice of the Global South Summit, which have been aimed at bringing the interest, priorities and concerns of the Global South on the global stage. At G7 also, we have always brought the issues of Global South to the forefront. The G7 summit under Italian presidency has chosen some key priorities for the current year. In broad terms, these are: first, conflict in Russia, Ukraine, Middle East with its consequences for the global agenda. Secondly, relationship with developing nations and emerging economies with focus on Africa and the Indo-Pacific region. Third, migration together with climate-energy linkages and food security. And last but not least, the artificial intelligence. Prime Minister's participation in the G7 summit would also provide a timely opportunity to follow up on outcomes of the G20 summit held under India's presidency last year and deliberate on issues which are significant for the global south. On the sidelines of the G7 summit in Italy, Prime Minister is also expected to hold bilateral meetings and discussions with the leaders of the G7 as also the outreach countries and the international organizations. As per the information that we have, besides India, Italy as G7 presidency has also invited Algeria, Argentina, Brazil. Brazil is also a member of the G20 Troika, Egypt, Kenya, Mauritania. Mauritania also holds the African Union presidency, Saudi Arabia, South Africa, which is again G20 Troika, Tunisia, Turkey, UAE, and some international organizations including the United Nations. Honorable Prime Minister is also expected to hold a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister of Italy. As you are all aware, the two Prime Ministers last met during the COP28 summit in Abu Dhabi in December 23. If I could take this opportunity to give a brief overview of India-Italy ties, because the exchanges between the two countries have been very intense in the last 1 year. Our ties are strong and multidimensional. As you are aware, Prime Minister of Italy had visited India on a state visit in March last year. You would also recall that she was our chief guest at the Raisina Dialogue in March last year. She thereafter visited New Delhi for the G20 summit. During her state visit, India-Italy relations were upgraded to strategic partnership with focus on defense, Indo-Pacific, energy, science and technology. Italy is also India's fourth largest trading partner in the European Union, with bilateral trade currently standing at $15 billion. We have a large diaspora resident in Italy, close to 200,000. Italy is also a partner in several global initiatives launched by India, including the International Solar Alliance, Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, Indo-Pacific Ocean Initiative, Global Biofuel Alliance, and India-Middle East Europe Economic Corridor, both of which were launched during the G20 summit in India. In the meeting with the Prime Minister of Italy, the two Prime Ministers are expected to review the entire gamut of bilateral ties and give directions for next steps. Other bilateral meetings between Honorable Prime Minister and the other world leaders present at the G7 summit are being scheduled. We will keep you posted as and when they concretized and the agenda therein. I would stop here and be happy to take some questions. Thank you very much.
We open the floor for questions, and please be mindful that your questions should be focused on G7 summit. With that, Manas.
Foreign Secretary, this is Manas Pratim for PTI. The G7 is expected to focus largely on the conflict in Ukraine. Is India and Prime Minister Modi is expected to, again reaffirm India's position and then kind of articulate what India wants G7 to, do to just diffuse the crisis in Ukraine?
Nainima from ABP Live. Just want to understand, I'm sure Prime Minister Modi will also be asked what will be India's participation in the Global Peace Summit. What will be the response if there is an update on that? Thank you.
फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी प्रणय उपाध्याय जी न्यूज से मेरा सवाल इस चीज़ को लेकर है कि यूक्रेन के राष्ट्रपति व्लादिमीर जेलेंस्की भी एक्सपेक्टेड हैं इटली के अंदर, तो क्या यूक्रेन की तरफ से प्रधानमंत्री मोदी से मुलाकात की कोई अनुरोध मिला है? और दूसरा, चुनाव जीतने के बाद और भारत की लोकतंत्र की इस जीत के बाद में अब जब प्रधानमंत्री वहां पर मौजूद होंगे तो किन मुद्दों पर प्राथमिकता के साथ भारत अपनी बात वहां पर रखेगा, अगर आप उन्हें भारत के फोकल पॉइंट्स को एड्रेस कर सकें?
Siddhant from Beyond. My question was similar to what Pranay sir asked. I mean, what will be the focus of Prime Minister at the summit, since this is his first visit abroad in the third term?
Foreign Secretary, you spoke about the importance of AI in the G7 agenda this time. What kind of a framework or messaging on AI would the G7 come up with? And what are we going to the G7 in Italy with our proposal on artificial intelligence?
Foreign Secretary, I'm Sahil from ANI. What would be the issues of Global South that PM Modi likely to address in this year's G7 summit?
Thank you very much. Let me take the question relating to India's participation at the Peace Summit first, because I'm making an assumption there could be other questions in the second round, so let me address them up in front. India will be participating at the Peace Summit, which is to be held in Switzerland, at an appropriate level. That consideration is currently going on in the system, and as and when we have a decision on the representative from India who would be participating, we'll be very happy to share it with you. With regard to the question on Ukraine, India's position, what the G7 would focus on therein, as I mentioned to you in my opening remarks, during this summit, while the G7 would focus on block sets of agenda in terms of their own discussions, the discussions that would be taken up in the outreach part of the summit would essentially focus on artificial intelligence, energy, and Mediterranean, as I mentioned to you. The other agenda items are essentially confined to the discussions only among the G7 countries. Those are not for the outreach summit. Having said that, it is quite natural that in the bilateral sideline discussions, conversations, the meetings that the Honorable Prime Minister will have, it is to be expected that the ongoing developments across the world of significance will come up for discussion. Naturally, Russia-Ukraine conflict is one of them. And like we have done always in the past at such international gatherings, we would be sharing our perspective, which is well known. We have always maintained that the dialogue and diplomacy is the best option. You would recall Prime Minister's own statement on this, that today is not an era of war, which found widespread appreciation and recognition. As far as the impact of war is concerned, right from the time that it started, in terms of the derivative impact on food, fuel, and fertilizer availability, the challenges that it caused to the supply chain globally, and caused disruptions in the global economy. We have always been in the forefront to talk about not just the conflict, the need for dialogue and diplomacy, but also the way the conflict has impacted on the priorities and interests of the developing countries, such as the one, some of which I highlighted. We have always, at the same time, also been in forefront to come forward and offer assistance wherever we can to alleviate some of these challenges which the countries of Global South have faced because of the conflict. We have also provided, India has also provided humanitarian assistance to Ukraine, as also to countries of the Global South, at least in those areas, and some of those areas which were impacted, which have been impacted by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So I think on Russia-Ukraine, this would be a continuous sharing of our perspective with the world leaders on the sidelines, and continue to emphasize and underline the importance of dialogue and diplomacy to address that situation. With regard to the question specific, Pranay, with regard to President Zelensky's meeting, as I mentioned to you right up in the beginning, the Prime Minister's bilateral schedule of meetings is still in works. It's work under progress, and as and when those bilateral meetings are finalized, we'll be happy to share with you. I'll combine the other three segments of question into one. आपने प्रश्न किया प्रणय जी के चुनाव जीतने के बाद किन मुद्दों पे जो है प्रधानमंत्री जी की प्राथमिकता इस मंच पे रहेगी. Siddhant, your questions repeat, which is what would Prime Minister focus on, and the question relating to what are our proposals going to be on the artificial intelligence. What I would say there is that, look, I mentioned to you the block topic on which the Prime Minister will be speaking at the outreach session. I don't think it would be fair for me to prejudge what the proposals, the ideas, the thought stream that the Honourable Prime Minister will put before the outreach session in terms of not just India's perspective, but also how many of these subjects directly link to and are of great relevance to the countries of the global south, in terms of the relevance that they hold for them, in terms of how they fit into their developmental priorities, etc. But we will, I think we can make an assumption here. Of course, we'll wait for Prime Minister's address to come out, that Prime Minister would be addressing most of this block topic from the framework of naturally India's own developmental worldview, how the developmental worldview has a synergetic and I would say in a way a catalytic role for the countries of the other countries of the global south, and how it fits into their priorities also. But I don't think it would be really fair for me at this stage to prejudge in any way what Honourable Prime Minister's projection of priorities and proposals will be at this session.
Huma, let's start here, and then John and Suhasini. Huma.
Sir, I'm Huma Siddiqui from the Financial Express. You said that there will be a bilateral with the Italian Prime Minister, and defense could be a focus there. Can you share more details about it?
No. What I said was that in their bilateral meetings, the two Prime Ministers are expected to review the strategic partnerships and its various elements. And one of that strategic partnership elements is defense, but that's not the only element. There are other elements of bilateral engagement that would be reviewed by the two Prime Ministers.
John. Suhasini.
Foreign Secretary, it's Wednesday, so if you could give us a little more clarity when you say India will attend the Swiss summit at the appropriate level. The invitation is for the Prime Minister, so would it be the Prime Minister or not? My second question is India requesting, or has Ottawa requested a bilateral meeting between Prime Minister Modi and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau? If there's any clarity on that. Thank you.
With regard to your first question, Swashni, I would only repeat that we will let you know once the consideration on the level of India's presence at the Peace Summit is finalized. With regard to any other bilateral meeting that are in the pipeline, once they are finalized, we'll be very happy to share with you the details of those.
Mr. Barua.
Foreign Secretary, I'm Sanjeev Barua from The Week. On the agenda, as you've mentioned, are the conflicts of Russia, Ukraine and West Asia. Is the Myanmar conflict also part of the agenda? Because this has been a bone of prime contention even in the ASEAN bloc, and there has been a direct fallout on India and South Asia.
Look, here I totally agree with you on the last part of your remark, which is that the developments in Myanmar do directly impact on India. But insofar as its presence in the G7 discussion is concerned, the summit agenda for G7 is fixed by the G7 and particularly the host country. And I have already listed out to you the block items which the G7 host country has prioritized for discussion, both among the G7 countries, but as also for the outreach summit.
Sir, you confirmed that we're participating in the Peace Summit. We've seen reports that China is staying away. So is that a consideration that Russia may not take too kindly to other countries participating maybe at a top level? And we've seen also that Indians are also getting killed in this conflict. We issued a rare warning to Russia last night. So given all these factors, is Russia a factor in our deciding at what level we will participate? Thank you.
Look, there are many variables that, go into consideration while formulating a decision on this. All I would say is, and I would repeat, sorry to do that, that we'll let you know once the level of our representation at this summit is finalized.
सर मैं मनीष हूँ TV9 भारतवर्ष से। प्रेसिडेंट बाइडेन इटली में रहेंगे। अभी जब चुनाव हमारे यहाँ हो रहा था तो इंडिया ने यूएस पर ये भी कहा था, नाराजगी जताते कि यूएस इंडिया में इलेक्शन को इन्फ्लुएंस करने की कोशिश कर रहा है। तो वैसी स्थिति में क्या प्रेसिडेंट बाइडेन को बताने के लिए क्या इंडिया ने तय किया है कि बायलैटरल, क्योंकि बायलैटरल जब कंफर्म होगा तो आप बताएंगे कि क्या हमारी इच्छा है कि हम बताएं उनको कि हमने क्यों ऐसा कहा था कि यूएस क्यों इलेक्शन में इंटरफेयर ना करे, या फिर यूएस की तरफ से कोई क्लैरिफिकेशन?
Okay, last here and one more question you had.
सर मैं जयप्रकाश हूँ दैनिक जागरण से। सर 11 वर्षों से भारत पार्टिसिपेट कर रहा है और पीएम मोदी का भी 5th चांस है वहाँ G7 में जाने का। आप समराइज कर सकते हैं सर कि इंडिया को G7 में जाकर हमें कुछ मिला है या क्या हमें बेनिफिट हुआ है या किस तरह से हम देखते हैं?
ये अंतिम सवाल है
सर। हालांकि ये मल्टीलैटरल समिट है, लेकिन एक ऐसा
Can I get your name please?
मेरा नाम संजीव त्रिवेदी है, मैं न्यूज़ 24 से हूँ। और ऐसे में जबकि भारत एक मल्टीलैटरल समिट में भाग लेने जा रहा है, एक प्रश्न है सामने लोगों के, वो ये है कि हमारे कई भारतीय टूरिस्ट वीज़ा लेकर के चले जा रहे हैं युद्ध क्षेत्र में, रशिया और यूक्रेन की, और खबरें भी दी गई हैं विदेश मंत्रालय की तरफ से कि 2 लोग मारे गए हैं। अभी भी बहुत से ऐसे लोग हैं जो वहाँ पहुँचे हैं और युद्ध क्षेत्र में हैं। तो क्या कोई ऐसा मौका आ सकता है इस विषय को जो संबद्ध लोग हैं उससे चर्चा करने का अवसर प्रधानमंत्री को मिलेगा?
मैं आप ही के प्रश्न से शुरू करता हूं, क्योंकि इस प्रश्न की कहीं ना कहीं रूपरेखा 1-2 बाकी प्रश्नों में भी है। देखिए, जो कि आपने कहा कि संबंधित लोगों से इसके बारे में वार्ता हो सके, मैं आपके संज्ञान में ये लाना चाहूँगा कि जहाँ तक इस विषय का मुख्य प्रश्न है, हम इस पे वार्ता लगातार पहले दिन से ही और काफ़ी व्यापक रूप से जो है रशियन अधिकारियों से, रशियन व्यवस्था से, रशियन नेतृत्व से और उनके जो सिस्टम के बाकी भाग हैं उनसे करते आए हैं। हमारे व्यापक जो प्रयास रहे हैं भारतीयों को सुरक्षित रखने के, उसका ये एक भाग है जिसमें हमने रशियन ऑफिशियल्स को ये स्पष्ट रूप से कहा है कि भारतीयों की जो भी भारतीय युद्ध क्षेत्र में किस प्रकार से आए हैं, कैसे आए हैं, वो अलग बात है, उनकी वापसी की जाए। दूसरा, जहाँ जहाँ हमें इसके बारे में जानकारी मिली है, किस तरह से उनकी रिक्रूटमेंट होती है, किस तरह से उनको वहाँ पे भेजा जाता है, तो जो भी डोमेस्टिक एजेंसीज हैं उनके साथ मिलके इस प्रकार की अवैध रिक्रूटमेंट को रोका जाए, उस पर भी प्रयास किए गए हैं। तो ये कहना कि इस पे हम संबंधित लोगों से वार्ता कर सकें, तो ये वार्ता पहले दिन से चल रही है। तो इसके बारे में मैं आपको निश्चिंत कराना चाहता हूं कि भारत सरकार ने इस मुद्दे को बहुत गंभीरता से लिया है। हर प्रकार की जो कि जब ये जानकारी हमारे संज्ञान में लाई गई है कि फलाना भारतीय इस समय युद्ध क्षेत्र में है, उस जानकारी पे तुरंत कार्रवाई की गई है। परिवार से संपर्क किया गया है, वो व्यक्ति वहां पहुंचा कैसे, उसका संज्ञान लिया गया है। रूसी अधिकारियों से बात की गई है कि भाई ये व्यक्ति है, हमें ये जानकारी मिली है, कृपया करके इसको बताएं करके। और ये हमारे प्रयास बिल्कुल सशक्त रूप से आगे चलते रहेंगे। On the question, Sudeep, from your question on Canada, look, you yourself mentioned we have just concluded our general elections. I'm sure everybody in the room would agree this was the largest democratic exercise in the history of humankind. Over 640 million odd people voted here, and I think the vibrancy of India's democracy was truly recognized and appreciated across the world. I really, don't want to say anything on what somebody else thinks how the democracy should function, but our democracy was in full display with enormous evidence to be seen. But insofar as Canada is concerned, I think the main issue with regard to Canada continues to be the political space that Canada provides to anti-India elements which advocate extremism and violence, and we have repeatedly conveyed our deep concerns to them, and we expect them to take strong action. Since you have associated yourself to the previous question, I'll associate myself to the same answer which I gave you, that as and when the schedule is finalized, we'll be very happy to share it with you. We have the question relating to the vandalization of the statue of Mahatma Gandhi. We have seen the reports of that, and we have taken out up with the Italian authorities. We understand that suitable rectification has already taken place. You mentioned that this is scheduled to be unveiled by the Prime Minister. I think, Ashish, you mentioned that in your question. Well, perhaps you have a better insight into the schedule and all that, but according to our sense, according to our information, the effort to vandalize the statue, which is of course deplorable, has been addressed, and the necessary rectification has taken place. If I would have to request Doordarshan India to repeat that question, I didn't quite get it.
The question was, sir, about the repeated terrorist incidents that we are witnessing in Jammu and Kashmir and other areas.
Yeah. That was. Look, in so far as the issue of terrorism is concerned, and the nature of cross-border terrorism that India faces, I'm sure that in terms of the challenges that such instances pose to the general peace and stability in the region, they would suitably figure in Prime Minister's bilateral conversation as and when it is necessary, depending upon the agenda of bilateral discussions. I think there was a question here on कि G7 में जो है हम इतने सालों से भाग ले रहे हैं, 11 बार भारत के नेतृत्व ने G7 की वार्ता से जुड़े हैं, उसमें सम्मिलित हुए हैं। इसके क्या बेनिफिट हैं, इसके क्या वो हैं। देखिए, जैसे कि मैंने अपने प्रारंभिक टिप्पणी में भी कहा, 2019 से लगातार प्रधानमंत्री मोदी जी G7 शिखर सम्मेलन में भाग ले रहे हैं। ये 5वीं बार है कि वो इस शिखर सम्मेलन में भाग लेंगे। G7 शिखर सम्मेलन, जैसा कि मैंने अपनी टिप्पणी में भी कहा, वैश्विक संदर्भ के, वैश्विक परिप्रेक्ष्य के इसी प्रक्रिया का एक अंग है। हालांकि वो G7 शिखर वार्ता नहीं थी, किंतु G20 की शिखर वार्ता में, G7 की शिखर वार्ता में G20, भारत की G20 की प्रेसिडेंसी की जो उपलब्धियां रही, उसका भी जो है जिक्र होना स्वाभाविक है। वो भी अपने आप एक महत्वपूर्ण चीज है। तो एक प्रकार से कहूं तो G7 में भाग लेना, सम्मिलित होना, सामरिक रूप से देखा जाए तो आर्थिक, डेवलपमेंटल, पॉलिटिकल, इकोनॉमिक स्पेस पे और ग्लोबल डेवलपमेंट के जो इश्यूज हैं उस पर एक भारतीय परिप्रेक्ष्य, भारतीय नीति, भारतीय सोच और उसके रूप से काफ़ी महत्वपूर्ण है। और नेचुरली जो बाकी इकोसिस्टम स्पेक्ट्रम ऑफ पार्टिसिपेशन में जो मीटिंग्स होती हैं, उनकी जो उपलब्धियां हैं वो अपने आप में महत्वपूर्ण है। थैंक यू।
प्रणय, आपको कुछ?
Thank you very much.
So with that, sir, thank you so much. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we'll come to the end of this press engagement. We'll continue with our conversation outside, and please do follow us on the digital medium to get to know more on the visit. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there you saw the